Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode, Extreme TV. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside my I have Professor Pixel. We're covering the Prisoner TV show from Britain. It's episode 9 called Checkmate. This is an interesting episode, Pixel. I have to sit there and say, as we've talked to being the young, early 20 something, watching stuff and that you've never heard of before, like The Prisoner, one of the best TV shows of all time. One of the early things we talked about here on The Prisoner was that it's pretty typical what the template's going to be. Number 6 is going to find some sort of way to try to escape. A woman's going to not be trustable and is going to get caught no matter what happens and sent back to the island. And so we're wondering, is this really going to change at all? And I've maintained since day one that that's not really what it's about, him escaping. It's about other things. But unfortunately, the way the order is being shown, again, episode 9, Checkmate, we have here an episode like a couple others recently that probably should have been shown in a different order, because we get the feeling here at an early on human chess event where actual players in the village are being moved and called out, that he seems to be new and he's trying to find out a way to, or discovers, I should say, through conversation, how to go about figuring out who are potential fellow escapees like himself, or plants, for lack of a better term, seeing how that's really popular in today's society. I thought it rang a few bells, and I got to sit there and say, over the past couple episodes, this episode in particular, I found it to be a bit better. It's a bit fresher, and I think some of the episodes that we were like meh about on the past few, no matter some cool things they have, the order's important. Because we saw in episode 1 him playing chess with an admiral on the beach as we're learning about the village and why number 6 is there. And here we're seeing that, yes, he's being asked if he plays chess, becomes literally a pawn in it. Pawns are the soul of chess, by the way, and any chess player knows that. I'll leave that as a little famous quote for somebody to figure out. But for me, I like this episode. It's a little different. It's not as action packed as some others. You get a lot of great shots of Village. I like how, even though there's a woman involved, it's not one he blindly trusts. I like the subversive nature of him trying to find out who can he possibly work with. It feels like a very spy-rich kind of episode, despite us knowing what's going to happen at the end with it escaping and being brought back. What's your initial take on this episode?
I mean, yes, I enjoy a lot of aspects when it comes to the attempt to escape. We obviously know that he won't, but with that in mind, we get to cut into some of the ways that he's able to. Like, we're able to actually focus on that, and with the theme being chess, it's actually quite enjoyable. And it kind of, from the start, number 6 is made to be a pawn, as a pawn in a game which we know he can't stand. But ultimately, as they're playing, somebody stands out, a rook, number 58, in fact. And during the game of chess, he seems to not follow orders properly, and he is taken away to the hospital, which we saw that, I believe, in like episode 2, where another participant in the village wasn't doing the proper thing, and so they were dragged away. But this time, compared to just being tortured, they show their way of being able to handle the villagers. And it's, I mean, it's quite interesting with the fact that they have like these 4 water tanks, and number 6 is brought in by number 2 to see this process. And basically they make the villager thirsty and desperate for water, and only by complying will they get what they want, and they think that's good enough. But clearly it's not, as number 6 later on during the day is following him around and noticing how he is being tailed. Eventually he notices number 6, and so he tries to run, and that, well, piques his interest.
I think this opening's pretty cool because we get a yet another rich baritone voice of who would be number two. And this guy's voice is powerful. It's commanding. It's the real deal. It's not quite sinister or aloof or hoity-toity white coat British. It's
He
aristocratic. It's This guy's got like shit. This is like almost Tom Jones level, which of course Tom Jones is Welsh, and all great singers are Welsh. We know this, but I thought, wow, so nice way to introduce the village, because we're going to be seeing a lot of the village on the outside too. And the other thing that was different, there was a lot of sunshine in this episode, and blooming flowers, which we don't normally get. I liked it. It was very appealing visually. But the thing is we see Rover at the beginning, and we're like, okay, what the hell's he doing and who's he going after? And we don't really see. But the purpose of seeing Rover move, which kind of confused me at first, is we see everybody kind of freezes and waits for Rover to go down the alleyway that he's going, except for one guy's walking by himself, which number 6 notices and follows. I thought this, for lack of a better term, cat mouse opening was a way to just get you drawn into what the hell is going on. I thought that was pretty cool. You were going to say something?
I was just going to say that number two is definitely not a little bitch here.
No, he's not. This dude's he's a stud. I was impressed by his performance. I like the idea that while number 6 is involved in this human chess game, that there's a lady talking to him, and we know, of course, don't trust women when it comes to this show. And the show, of course, does not want him to have mutual sexual attraction or relationships in here at all, or same sex or any kind at all. It's to avoid all that. It's really to talk about, like we said before, liberty, individual freedom, desire to not conform, and how, as a man, do you fit into society, especially if you have a particular potential set of secrets like he does, and how there's dark forces out there. And that's one thing that's alluded to here early on, is that they talk about, and this is not subtle, it's a giant, beautiful centerpiece here of chess with people playing. They talk about how there's bloodlines, for lack of a better term, which is code for Illuminati, Rockefellers, those kinds of things from the American perspective, and the Davos crowd, and all these conspiracy kind of things too. But it's cool that back 50, 60 years ago when the show came out, they used that plot in a way to kind of just put it in here. Not that it's major, but if you're into all that stuff, it just adds another layer of hey, that's pretty freaking cool, of reading something into it. Um, I liked how, again, him talking and seeing and observing what's going on with the Rook, it allows us to be a participant in it, because the Rook is somebody who we see and we don't know immediately if we can trust him or not. In that we've seen where there's been people it looks like number 6 can trust, but maybe something happens, or we know they're a plant. Sometimes we don't. We've talked about that with women already, but here, when he's talking to the lead chess guy, again, that quick back and forth bit that we get in a really good episode of this British, for like, not even humor, but just sharp-witted stuff. That's really good stuff. So I like it when we get that. And it's amazing how the guy basically speaks almost in code talk. Well, you can tell who's black or who's white, the pieces on the chessboard, by the way they're going to operate. And number 6 is like, well, I don't understand. He's like, hey, it's like life. There's some people that, you judge, and you judge them by their attitudes. And so it's just, these little snippets are just fantastic and whatever. And so, yeah, he walks with a guy. Again, a lot of people are going on. And I have to mention here, it, I mentioned in last week's episode because we skipped an episode before, but we're starting to see more and more shots of the vertically challenged individual wearing the black bowler hat and the black and white umbrella walking around. And even though it's not raining, we're seeing this guy a lot more. I think he was pouring milk in an episode recently. So that can't be by accident. But no words, no people looking at him. We just see the camera linger on him as he walks by, while him and the chess master are walking off. Um, but they're trying to find a little safe space to kind of whisper and talk, because that's how these spy things go. And of course, the woman's following him, who is playing in the chess thing too, and she kind of wants to be a part of it. But again, we see number 2 next morning. What basically says, hey, it's like he almost read his mind or was listening to his conversations. He's like, yeah, I know what's going on with the Rook. Why don't you join me and I'll show you what's going on? And we can talk about all the different types of experiments that do exist, but in the late 50s, early 60s, a lot of them were not public. And the hardcore ones with the government, with MK Ultra and Project Paperclip and all these things, wouldn't come public till the 70s or 80s, but people knew about B.F. Skinner. They knew about Pavlov with dogs and classic and operant conditioning. And that's kind of what we see here. we've seen that mind control and drugs are definitely a staple of the show, but it's not really, it's just a method for them doing what they do. They don't linger on it really hardcore. But yeah, this number two, when he's looking at the rook gun, he's like, "Hey, in society, one must conform." This guy, I mean, he looks like a bastardized Peter O'Toole for you hardcore folks. This guy is probably the best number two just from what little screen time he's had. I'm liking him, and I'm meaning I'm respecting him in a good way. This guy makes me think like he could break him. The other guys, I'm like, no, no, number six is going to own your ass. I don't care what you do. I mean, that's the look I was getting. Um, I like how a little later on, like I say, they're walking around where they're trying to figure out how to do it. And here's the genius of the show. You find out really quick early on that you can tell by the way you're talking to people whether they'll be like with you or against you. And they call the people that are plants guardians or prisoners. That's your black and your whites or whatever. And so we see number six kind of walking around in a cool scene where he's talking to just people doing their jobs and their work, and the way they respond to him, we go, oh, I get it. I can tell who might potentially be a guardian or not. And I liked this. Again, show us, don't tell us. Let us see it develop. It's pretty cool. And what was nice finally for an episode is we get a chance to feel that there are legitimately other people here that are in the same state as him. We just don't know who. We don't know how many. We don't know what there is. And there's a little hint of mystery and history to it where we've been so focused on him as an individual, we forget that this whole village is created not necessarily for him, but just in general. He's just one of many others. After all, he's only number six, and we've seen numbers close to 100, I think. I don't even know what the highest number
Yeah.
we've seen is. Someone say 60 or 80. So this is not, again, just for him. He can't think he's that special. You know what I mean? But I thought equally strong was the doctor in here that was giving number two some of the some feedback on how to best deal with number six. I thought it was done well, but in a goofy scene, they bring in a lady that was playing chess with it, and she's telling number two, "Hey, we're basically hypnotized, or we're making it where she is going to fall in love with number six. We're going to put this little thing around her neck, so it's a tracer. So basically, she'll always keep an eye on him." Because her elevated heart rate will be synonymous with the electrical signal, blah, 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 a little techno speak. The idea is that she's going to be an annoying sidekick because we're going to see one of these clingy women types, but it's just there. But we know from this, he's not going to be trusting her, which is a relief because we've seen it 3-4 times now, right? You trust a woman and it doesn't work or whatever too. But
Yeah.
I thought the administrative ones in here were just great. This is the only time I actually felt somewhat terrified or going, man, number six is really the underdog here. Other times before, I didn't feel that way. What did you think about all this?
Yeah, no, when they bring in the woman who played the White Queen before, um, for her to basically be hypnotized into being their little spy unwittingly, I definitely liked that angle more than just, okay, it's yet another woman who actually turns out to just be in on it. And so I feel bad for her because ultimately she's in love with him against her will.
Which is kind of creepy, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, forcing
yeah,
somebody to do that.
yeah. And then you have the fact that she also, while she seemed like a genuinely nice person, she has fallen to this level, and it doesn't seem that she's going to have a way out. But I really love Six and the new character, the Rooks, relationship during this episode. Their partnership that they're able to build out. They're able to go through the village. They get a shopkeeper. They get a couple other people, and they come up with a plan. They make a radio. They're going to trick the village, trick number two's control room, and they're going to try to make their way out. And how they set up, they basically make a gang within the village, and it looks like that this is actually one of the plans that will stick out to me at the end of this, because it took a village. But as they go to enact their plan, they actually get it working. They go ahead, pretend to be a crashed airliner, and the number two's control room. They tell number two about it, but they aren't aware yet that it's actually two and the Rook. And so they go ahead, they set it up. The ship is on its way to a certain location, and the Rook goes ahead. He gets on this one float that they have to attempt to go ahead to the ship, while Six storms the control room with his crew. The way that they know that the Rook is still on his way to the boat is that there is this signal. There's this signal that keeps repeating, and eventually it stops. When it does that, everybody with number 6 thinks, okay, well, that's our time to go. We need to go. But 6 says it's too soon. So he goes ahead, goes down to the beach, lets them wait there, and when he goes down there, he finds the empty raft. He takes it to the boat that's just there in the distance. When he gets on, he's welcomed by one crewmate and wants to see the skipper to talk about his other crew. Well, he gets in there, and what do they find? A TV screen with number 2 on it. And right by him, number 58, the Rook. It seems that their little game didn't go so well because 58 was using the tactics on 6 and identified him as one of the leads within the village and thought it was a test of loyalty, learning that number 6 was a prisoner all along. 6 tries to fight his way to control the boat, but that's when Rover comes up and pushes the boat along at the end. And it's just another futile escape.
I like this because it was a bit of a swerve. It's like, okay, not only does have a few people helping him out, and it seems like it's working well. It's nice because during the day they're trying to gather parts from a video camera, an audio video device, an old school one, to make this transmitter so they can see where they're at, and it gives us a little bit of contact with the outside world potentially, which is nice because when we're isolated, any contact with the outside all of a sudden becomes very hard to get, like the radio we heard in a previous episode. And then here we're assuming that because of them coming in, whoever would be hearing the signal, that's going to be his way out and some contact. And even if he doesn't make it, there's, you're no longer in a closed system here in the village. And you would think, of course, that the village would pick up the signal. They don't avoid really serious plot holes like that. But what's the beauty of this thing is you get all the spy stuff where during the day they're on the beach and you see people laying around doing their stuff like it's a normal village town. And you're going, wow, number 6 really stands out because he's trying not to ingratiate himself with everybody. And that's the whole point. Some people have submitted and others haven't. And they're just doing their thing in the background, laying out, sunning themselves, taking a nap, reading, having a good time. And again, it's a beautiful backdrop and all that too. But the whole sinister thing is you've got a woman that's programmed against her will to like this guy. You've got a guy that's helping him out, who's making a signal and everything too. And the reason why he's able to do this is because he had created a specific defense system. And so here we go, late 50s, early 60s, after World War II. We talk about Korea and all that, but basically after World War II, you had a race to see who could create the best technology. And this was kind of a big deal, so much so that even in James Bond, they had the ATAC system in For Your Eyes Only, I think in 81, kind of like a similar legacy type thing. And so this was a plot device that was legitimate for the time. And while it's really nothing to do hardcore with the episode and what they're exploring, we know that if he was going to escape, right, based off what we've seen, he's not going to make it. That's the whole point. He's a prisoner. He's not a prisoner who got freed. But the point is he was fucked from the beginning. Even though he found out the actual method, psychology-wise, which, we've seen people being treated at Pavlovian, how to find out who's a guardian and who's a prisoner. And it's like the genius of that with the Rook, it makes perfect writing sense because we see the Rook literally breaking down and all that too. But then we see the fact that he's using that against number 6. It's like, well, from the beginning, he was messed up. I mean, he was a mark, if you want to call it that. And I honestly, and I hate admitting this, I did not see that coming. I thought, okay, I know he's not going to make it. Who the hell's Rover going after at the beginning? Oh, the point of Rover was just so we could see him identify somebody that was like-minded. And so I thought that was really kind of badass too. But you get number two in being summoned when all this is going on in the evening, and he's in his karate robe. And we get a little bit of action, of course, where he takes the people out the lighthouse as he tries to sail off, and all that too. But this was much more shorter and less abbreviated than when he was on the ship and he took over with the pirates and all that too. It really was all about the setup with the other people. So I liked it. I can't say I'm surprised by the ending as far as the Rook. It's just the way they did it. Again, this felt like this should have been an earlier episode in order that was being shown, because we see a lot of great shots of the village. We see them in the background as people are doing the things. They play off of certain things. We already saw an earlier episode where he was programmed to kind of use his other hand against a guy that came in to be looking just like him. And I think they even fenced, I think, in that episode. And here he reaches out with the antenna to the one guy. It's like touche, touching him. And that's a nice little plot thing to do early on, because we're going to see that later in an episode with fencing, if this was shown in an earlier order. But I've heard different things about this episode, though, over the years with some friends of mine saying they liked her. They thought it was kind of boring and silly and just really plain Jane. It didn't really go too hardcore into any major conspiracies or thoughts or any diatribes on humanity and all that. But I thought this is a great episode in terms of just showing you the shit number six has to deal with and not telling you. And you just watch it, and it's spy stuff and all that too. So for me, this definitely worked a bit better than others. And one other
Yeah.
point I want to bring up too is that 16, 17 episodes, whatever the season's going to end up being, originally was almost supposed to be about half that. So to me, there's definitely some episodes that are filler. And I know that back in the day when the VHSs came out in the States, I want to say in the 80s to 90s or whatever, certain episodes were never shown, and you could only get them, and you had to figure out what order they went in and all that. And that was kind of a big deal too. But this was definitely a nice little episode to kind of say, hey, if we just took an episode out that doesn't mean anything, but is a good representation of the prisoner, you could do that with this one. So I don't think of it as filler, but it definitely makes me consider, wow, we're going through the series now, and the order just seems like it's all messed up. And I think that hurts some of the episodes. I don't think it's helping any of them too, by where they're placed. Overall, I wanted to ask you, because I know this is the first time you're watching this whole show. At this point, are you getting a little tired of the prisoner shtick?
Well, we're 9 episodes in. Eventually, when you have a goal and a character is forced back at the beginning of that goal at the end of every episode, it gets a little tiresome. That being said, while that might be, like I said, tiresome, that doesn't mean I can't appreciate what each episode is trying to do. I would definitely say that I'm grateful we only have like about 7 more to go through, because there is a certain point where I would have to take a major break. But I'm not there yet. I think I'll be able to finish through. And when it comes to this episode, I actually kind of disagree. I would not take this one out at all. I think this is one of the few episodes where number 6 actually gets to interact with other members of the village in trying to figure out, okay, who can I trust? I can trust people now. I just need to figure out how. And while that is taken away from him at the end, it was a great thing to feel, because other than that, number 6 has been alone this entire time. There's been one or two, like, oh, look, an old friend. Oh, look, a woman. Oh, look, it's just one member or two other members that he really interacts with. But here, the Rook is a prominent side character, and he's definitely going to be memorable to me.
I think it's nice to have an episode kind of following up on your point there, where it's not just him. There are other people. It makes it a little bit different. And I think that, to your point with the Rook being kind of a major side character rather than just a woman, it adds to it a little bit. And again, the order is really important, I think, because it would mean more if we've seen different things, or if this is one of his first major attempts of getting out. Um, and it kind of, I'm going to take a step back here and talk a little bit about something that seems completely unrelated, and that's Miami Vice, Michael Mann. And people that watched the original television show, like myself from the 80s, recognize it as, probably one of the greatest 80s shows that there was, for a lot of reasons. But the thing is as a director, you have a certain style and a certain tone. And the person that would go on to do Collateral and Heat, and also the Miami Vice movie remake from 2006 or 7, whatever it was, starring Colin Farrell and Jimmy Fox. When you watch those shows, you're like being drawn into them from the beginning, and the way the films are shot in the TV show is shot, it really is more about the emotion of what's going on in the episode. You go, oh, it had something to do with Crockett and drug dealers and cocaine, and I don't know, Miami and clothes and cars and women and drugs and stuff like that. And so back then in the 80s, a lot of people said, the show is just all flash and, rock music and stuff like that, rather than saying, no, it's capturing a moment in time that is relevant for it. And if you go back there and you live during that time, you would feel like you're there. And I feel like The Prisoner, to me, it's so clearly one of those kinds of shows like a Miami Vice, where you can feel being drawn into this hardcore message of, all right, he's trying every possible way to get the hell out of there. Is he going to yield, submit, or are they going to break him? And so ultimately we have to go through a lot of that, to the point where I think we get tired of seeing it, which I feel you're way past that point. And also a lot of people who watch the show, like when I did, when we talk about it, that was the thing. Well, we can't get out. What the hell's he doing? Well, that's the point of the show. It's really more of the process and the setup of it. And I think the majority of the message of each episode is the beginning. A lot of times it's not that way, if there is one. And I think that there's ultimately going to be some confrontation here between him and the powers that be, because ultimately it's a pissing contest. Who's in charge here? Yeah, you're in control of your own humanity, your own fate, but we know that they can drug you. We know that they can control everything about you. And we know that they're dehumanizing you. And whatever parallels you want to draw to that in today's society, or like 50, 60 years ago, people can, argue what's powerful about it. But I think that's kind of the whole point in drawing this out, is that we're going to get so fed up that whatever the climax is, maybe we should have anticipated it all the way from the beginning, just like in this episode, the Rook got him at the beginning. But yeah, I think it's a totally different perspective. And, we mentioned before with Hitchcock, you and I are Hitchcock fans, but there's a part of me that doesn't like the mistaken identity kind of nonsense, like in a North by Northwest, or, oh my God, we see the bomb under the table, so we know it's supposed to happen. And, or even here in The Prisoner, we know that somebody's being programmed for something, but we know number 6 doesn't know it. So we have this knowledge, but he doesn't. The discovery part of it, I prefer more myself. So it's hard sometimes with watching these shows or movies to go, okay, what are they trying to do? And how can I switch my perspective? Or is it something I gradually want to like or not, or what? And I think that what makes this show sometimes a hard watch. Because I know a lot of people say, man, I just don't know what the hell's going on in the show. I just don't get it. He keeps trying to escape and nothing works. And unfortunately, I do think there's a lot of filler episodes. And so for you, if it's not filler, that's great. But for me, I'm going, don't know. Which ones would I chop if I had to? This could be one of them, even though I kind of liked it more than some of the more recent ones too. Any comments on what I just said?
No, I've pretty much said all that I feel thus far. I certainly hope that as we get closer to the climax of the series, there seems to be some kind of step that is substantial, that actually sticks with him. But other than that, I'm still glad that we decided to dig into the series. We're almost done, and whenever it's done, at least we'll have the memories to take
Oh, you're
along with
being
us.
polite. You're not digging it. I get it. I get it. That's why we do this here on the Extreme movie show. And the particular version here, Extreme TV with The Prisoner, we'll be switching to something else afterwards too. So that's pretty cool. So, Pixel, obviously, I'd like to thank you for showing up, being the young, early 20 something, checking something out that's really old that appeals to me as an 80s kid in a show like this. Now, even though I've said I think this is one of the greatest TV shows of all time, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the most entertaining or the most fun to watch. So those are things that we talk about more in detail when we talk about movies. And so here in the 4th of July weekend of 2022, we'll be talking about the original Top Gun. And was it as good as the remake that just came out and just surpassed $1 billion? We'll find out here soon. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. I'd like to thank everybody for listening and getting the word out about the Xtreme Movie Show. For Professor Pixel and myself, Rob, your host here at the Xtreme Movie Show, I'd like to say thanks for watching. Have a good night. And as always, stay extreme.
Be seeing you.
Yes, be seeing you.